Am I live? Yes, I'm told I should speak louder, so I'm speaking loud, okay? The only planet of choice, transceiver Phyllis V Schlemmer, edited by Bennett. A provocative, mind-opening experience, says James J. Hurtak, PhD. I have read all the chapters so far. I've read them consecutively and uploaded them on YouTube. I think the signal is a bit better here. Somebody made a bit of a fuss, and I hope it works now. This is chapter 15, the Nazarene. It is when replying to a questioner who has used another term than the Nazarene that Tom uses the term Christ or Jesus. The 9 call him the Nazarene. This chapter deals with the Nazarene as a person, his origins and mission, and it needs no introduction. The transmission speaks for itself. Guest. This is a meditation circle and a circle of people who are sitting in with questions and answers to the council, which is here called the Council of Noun. Guest. On earth, there are many ideals for God. Could you indicate which of these ideals most closely match the ideals of the 9? Tom. The ideal given by the man called Christ, as he was the last of us to visit planet Earth. Guest. And of those descriptions of Christ given in the Bible, which is the most accurate? Tom. There are many misinterpretations in the Bible. It is true that the man you call Christ lived a normal human existence. But he was a man of discretion, and he walked with discretion among the people. Guest. Was he one of the 9? Tom. No, but he emulated their thoughts and their understanding. He was all of us at once. He came with the perfect goodness that is in each of us. Within us, as within you, there are various elements, but he had from each of us the most perfect of the elements of us. There are many things that are not told about him, for what he did in private, and he did not allow the world to see him in his human frailties. Andrew, I want to follow up on the statement you once made when you said that 2,000 years ago you almost succeeded in helping to raise the consciousness of this planet. Was this in the time of the man we call Jesus Christ? Tom, that is correct. Andrew, how did you in fact work with this being called Jesus Christ? Could you please tell me? I think I would be most illuminated. And I think it would be illuminating for all of us. Tom, we do not call him Jesus Christ. We call him the Nazarene. His inspirational work and his healings were inspired by us, and his energy was supplied by us. He gave the commitment, and when he made the commitment, he knew what he must do. We had great hopes at that time, but what you would call your civilization and your societies created the problem, and then you made a god of him, as you have made a god of many. This will not happen again. There will be not one, but a collection of beings that will raise the level of consciousness of this planet. It is very important that you do not deify us. It is very important that you understand that God is in each and every one of you, and that God is love, and that the love that creates is the love that creates the one God. Andrew, the mission of the Nazarene apparently almost succeeded, but as you say, there was failure because of the role of society and our so-called civilization. There are many on earth today who fully expect the return of the Nazarene, and I gather from what you say that it is not possible, since the single individual will not return to... Tom, that is correct. A single individual will not return. There are many on this planet similar to the Nazarene. It will be a collection. Those that come and say they are the Nazarene or the Messiah are not the true Messiah. As we have explained before, when they call themselves masters, they are not masters. Andrew, on the one hand, humankind needs to understand that you exist and that you come in peace. On the other hand, they expect some individual, single person to return, by whatever means, clouds of glory, etc. I've talked to people in some of our churches, and they say that only Jesus can return, and anybody else is a representative of the devil. How does one cope with that kind of attitude amongst people? Tom, you pray as we pray. This always has been the problem. But when we come and when they see the good works, and they will know who we are. After all, the Nazarene said, "You shall know them by their work." When people see that we do not come in war, because there's no war with us, as there is on your planet, and when they see that we come with love and with technology to help this planet that is exterminating itself, how can they but know that we come from God? Yes. Jesus said that the two most important commandments that we all had to be aware of are that we should love God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our might, and that we should love each other as we love ourselves. And that's what all the scriptures rested on, those two commandments. The way I perceive the first commandment is in the way the Jewish people used to love the Lord, their God, through rituals and prayer. I wonder how in our daily lives we could really do that, love God with all our heart every day. Tom, as you know, in ritual it becomes redundant. Take time for self alone in communication with creation. This would set the time for being with the Creator. It is important, but not compulsory, to find a method of meditation that would suit you. You can make that your ritual. Also, if you take the second commandment, you know, on earth there are many who do not love themselves. Through corruption, many do not love themselves. We would extend it to say, utilize kindness to all and to yourself. You then fulfill that commandment. David. It's reported in the Bible that Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh before the Father but by me." And that seemed inconsistent. Has that just been misinterpreted, Tom? Is not man attempting to rule man? David. Yes, at times they are. Tom. Then is it not so that it is man that placed it upon the parchment? David. Christians who see the Nazarene as the most advanced example of how we should live tend to point to the sentence that I quoted as being a very important statement. Tom. Is that not dogmanes? David. Oh, absolutely right. Tom. Is that not an attempt to control the belief system of religion? We ask you, do you not trust your own divine being? David. Evidently not. Tom. Yes. Andrew. In some people I have met and talked to while in Israel, there is still the expectation of the arrival of a Messiah. Tom. The Messiah, the messenger, would be with a landing. Should that happen, we speak of the man, the Nazarene. Andrew. Would they recognize the Nazarene? Tom. Yes. Andrew. Would the landing of the Nazarene be in the area of what is now called Israel? Tom. Yes, because the Nazarene is the leader of Hoover. John. How is the danger of him being deified again going to be overcome? Will the Israelites understand this time? Tom. There would not be one, there would be many Hoovits who arrive. They would explain, and they would bring the understanding that the Christ is within every individual. Harriet. We were wondering about the Immaculate Conception, and whether you could tell us about that, and also if the Nazarene had offspring. Tom. You ask us to tell us our thoughts, or our knowing? Harriet. Your knowing. Tom. We understand not why humankind made complications out of simple information. the Earth Mother of the Nazarene was implanted by the Hoover in what you term, you do it in your planet without physicalness. John, yes. Artificial semination. Tom, yes. Jesus was the firstborn. He is Hoover. That the nation of Israel calls Jehovah. But his birth, then Mary and Joseph had 7 other male and 3 female. The Nazarene's physical brother and sister siblings were not implanted. You asked if the Nazarene experienced the physical glory? Guest, we were talking about the genetic influence of the Hoovits, and we identified the first 2 genetic implants of the Hoovits, and we wondered whether the Nazarene represented the 3rd. Tom, he was like that, but that does not mean he offspringed children. David, so he had no offspring. Tom, you make your world complicated. He was a representative of Hoover. In the genetic stream of Hoover, there existed beings of Hoover on planet Earth. What the Nazarene did was to reawaken the coding of memory within. He was a man upon Earth, and with nearly all men upon Earth, went through a sexual development, as do females, which comes from the source of soul development, and from within. For in the moment of sexual exchange, it is one moment in your physical life when you attain the oneness of your Creator. It is that time and moment which is sought, called orgasm. This is the part of the difficulty upon planet Earth, for humankind has misunderstood the purpose of sex, and in searching for the returning of the Creator, has debased it. And because the founders of religion knew the truth of this returning, and did not wish the masses to attain it also, they forbade it, and therefore made it dominant. Part of the difficulty of male humankind moving from one woman to another is endless. Endlessness stems from the understanding and non-development of true exchange, and the purpose of this exchange. It was necessary for the Nazarene to experience that with the Magdalene. In the exchange with the Magdalene, he was able to maintain his true identity with the Creator. Is that understood? When both parents, whose motive is clean, we do not wish to preach, who understand who they are and their oneness with their mate, and have attained the bringing of 2 together in unison and great glory, this then brings great joy. If you experience this, remember, do not let it pass, for it is catching a star, riding a star. Remember that, for it will always bring you back to the returning of your creation. Know also that you are part of the Creator, and that you also created the Creator. Harriet, that's beautiful. John, so, what you're saying is that Mary Magdalene did not have a child. Tom, not from the Nazarene. Guest, did Jesus, perhaps in connection with Joseph of Arimathea, according to tradition, ever visit Glastonbury in England? Tom, the Nazarene circled planet Earth, for it was of necessity for his energy to permeate the globalness. David, was that a specific yes to Glastonbury? One of the locations he passed through. Tom, do you need a map to understand energies? What you term special or sacred or holy from all beliefs was touched, and in your kingdom, in Kingston, in England, also. Guest, so the tradition which exists in Glastonbury that Jesus visited as a boy with Joseph of Arimathea, is that correct tradition? Tom, yes. I just explained he travelled around the globe. John, you're referring to the lost years of Nazarene, between the age of 12, when he was at the temple in Jerusalem, until his ministry began. Can you tell us about that? Tom, at the age of 14 and within a year of his manhood, he began a long journey. He went into the area of the Himalaya, and he spent a great deal of time in Egypt, viewing the pyramids, learning about the energies and knowledge of the pyramids. He also spent a long time in the lands of the Himalayas. He had also spent much time with the Essenes. He took within him the triangle of knowledge of India, Egypt, and the essences. He had the assimilation and the truth of all three. John the Baptist also spent time with him in Egypt. John: Yes, will any records of this be discovered? Tom: There are records in 2 of these areas, one in Egypt and the other in what is now Israel. At the proper time, there will be a correlation of finding these records within 6 months of each other. There will be fragments, and there will then emerge truth. David: Is it true that the Nazarene travelled and learned in the Far East? Tom: There was a time of travel, including to the nation that you know as the nation of the sun, Japan. Israel: We know that the Nazarene, Jehovah, came 3 times. One of these was the Buddha. Could you explain to me the necessity of that incarnation and in that environment, India? What was its purpose? Tom: Your nation did not go forth as they should. Therefore, it was of necessity for one to come who would cover a great portion of the earth with the heart of understanding of the universe. It is in alignment with the progress of the universe. In actuality, those are the Buddhas following have grasped the truth into their soul and heart quicker than those who should have, the Hebrews. Do you understand? Israel: That's a person. Yes, if it doesn't work from the inside, try to make it work from the outside. Tom: That is correct, yes. Andrew: What was the original language in which John wrote down the book of Revelations? You said that the original is the one to read and that the translations have problems. Tom: It was in Aramaic. Andrew: Do you know if any such manuscript exists? Tom: Yes, but not in an area or place where you may recover it. It will come in time. It is in the city of Jerusalem, and it will be found. Andrew: I see. There's not a copy in any museum or anywhere where it is publicly viewable. Tom: Oh, you may go to your Vatican. Andrew: Could you give us the story of how John received his message? Was it in a situation like we are sitting in here? Or was he alone? Or was it before the baptism of Jesus? Tom: It was before the baptism. It was the revelation that brought the understanding of who Jesus was. Andrew: Was Jesus a witness to this revelation? Yes, he was a young boy. He came as we speak to you. Do you understand? Andrew: Yes, I understand. Right, that's remarkable. John: Can you say something about original sin and the act of baptism and whether the importance of these continue today? Does the concept of original sin brings us into this world with guilt? Tom: In the beginning, when the covenant was made with Hoover and it was broken, original sin followed by the Hebrew seed. When Hoover came again as the Nazarene, it was released completely, for his sacrifice was complete, release. But those that followed after the Nazarene perpetrated many things in his name, began a set of rituals as previous to the time of Hoover. Do you understand? John: Well, in the Christian service we consider that Christ in his death did forgive us all our sins, and presume that interfered the original sin. Tom: He did not forgive you. The universe relieved you. John: Yes, but symbolized by his act. Tom: Yes, if there had been acceptance, the guilt of original sin would also have been relieved. It was the time. John: But the baptism today is still to relieve us of original sin. Tom: It is not to relieve that. In each church is a different way. In a religion that was not begun by the Nazarene, baptism is not to remove original sin. It is to indicate acceptance of the Nazarene. In the beginning it was Peter who started this, following the pattern of John the Baptist. John: There is a belief that the crucifixion of Christ took away the sins people committed since his death. In other words, Christ forgave sins afterwards. I feel this is an avoidance of responsibility. Could you clarify this all? Tom, you are asking whether if they ask in his name, they are forgiven. John, people feel that by his crucifixion, they have already been forgiven for their sins. In other words, it seems to me a license to sin, which doesn't seem right to me. Tom, that is not the purpose. The crucifixion of the Nazarene was not to relieve people of the burden of their own responsibility. It was to show everyone that for the love of God and for his commitment, he would willingly die. Remember that the Nazarene did not attempt to communicate with the Gentiles, only to those of the Hebrew nation of Palestine. If he could have relieved them and made them aware, he would have shown them, and in turn the rest of the planet, the way to individual and global transformation. Within the nations that you call Christian, and who worship him as a god, there are those that understand that he is of a Trinity. John, was Jesus the first person ever to be resurrected? Tom, it is true that he was the first to be resurrected, but not in the sense that you understand. He was the first that was returned to his civilization, Hoover, in the manner in which he was returned. There have been many who have been resurrected, but he has been returned to his civilization. The people upon the planet Earth who saw his resurrection believed that it made him a god. Andrew, so with reference to people who came from one of the universal civilizations and then went back, you mean to say that Jesus, or Jehovah, was the first who was brought here and then returned physically intact, and this was not done earlier? Tom, yes, there were what you would call resurrections and returning to spheres, but not returning to civilizations. Andrew, is this really what we would call teleportation or bilocation, or... Tom, it would be bilocation. It was the first time it had been done. John, is the one who took the body of Jesus, Joseph or Arimathea, the same person as Joseph, the head of the civilization of Aragon? Tom, it is two different ones. Andrew, we're really wondering whether Joseph of Aragon was with the Nazarene on earth. Tom, he was with a hawk, Horus, in Egypt. He was the one that is called Imhotep. He was also a high priest in the time of the Nazarene, called Annas. John, was Joseph of Arimathea also from Aragon by any chance? Tom, I will consult. Joseph of Aragon has said no. That Joseph of Arimathea was from Altea. It is only a similarity of names. Steve, we usually think of the Eastern methods of attaining enlightenment, the Hindu and Buddhist, as far more advanced than the Western method. Is this so? Tom, to be removed from the world is not the best. All may reach the highest of heights within themselves, but how would they react if they must reach the heights when there are those that need their service and their help? To escape the responsibility of involvement, it is true you may believe that you have become a master of a perfect being, for if you do not interact with others, then you will indeed think that you are perfect. Steve, well, I'm thinking of the Eastern sacred books, the Upanishads and the Vedas, the Sutras and the Tao. Are they given from other civilizations? Tom, it is so. As with others, yes, but it has not been used always for betterment. And the Eastern philosophers, if the Eastern philosophers had the truth of their fellow men within their heart, their nations would be highly evolved, but they use it at times to make themselves masters without uplifting the souls that need help. It is important that those who have understanding of suffering attempt to relieve suffering. Steve, I would like to explain why I asked that question. It seems that all our communication are very much within the Western philosophical and religious tradition, and emanate from the same source that Western civilization and religion emanate from. And this is one thing that I have to struggle with, because I have grown up to think that the Eastern methods and religions are more enlightened. Tom, how many millions of their people are suffering? Do you understand what we say? They are also in the trap. John, yes, I think we see the faults in our culture and we look across the fence and we think they have the answer. And we look across the fence and think that they have the answer, but yes, Tom, if you sit upon a mountain and look below you and say, I am enlightened, for I sit and pray, and those that are below me, it is important for them to suffer, and I cannot do anything to help, then you have set yourself above them. We will use your term of karma. It is not truly fully understood. In their thinking that suffering is their karma, they, in truth, have created suffering karma for themselves. To not be involved with your fellow men, to simply place a hand to help them or a publication to ease their burden, they cannot be masters as they proclaim. To have mastered all the physical, the important thing is to master all of the physical with involvement, not detachment from those that suffer. Yes? Steve, well, just to repeat, to do books, as I have mentioned, in fact emanate from extraterrestrial sources, although they may not be fully developed and highly evolved. Tom, yes, but also remember that people use that which benefits them, and they make their interpretations in order to control others, or to make themselves better than their fellow humans, yes? John, so you're saying that they have as many distortions as the Bible? Tom, as the word book, yes. There is the most singular important thing that humankind has neglected, and we speak of nearly all humankind, and that is compassion. When there is compassion for all living things, including those that are closest to you, then the shift in consciousness of the planet begins and will be accelerating. You see, in the nature of humankind, you may have compassion for a child that falls, that is yours, but not see the pain of another child that falls. You may have compassion when you see the slaughter of villages, if you are in affinity with them, but not the slaughter of those that slaughter. It's when there are those that you love, that you do not agree with, that do not agree with you, when you have the need of their agreement, that you lose compassion for them. It is when you may maintain that compassion or gain it or regenerate it and feel the feeling that they feel without self-involved. Then you come out of the ashes and begin the growth. The building then is strong and secure and not fragile, but it could be burned again. Humankind has not had compassion for humankind. Even one of you who might have compassion for a small child has no compassion for an adult that does not agree with you. That is also changing. John. Yes, on that. Ooh, it's interesting that we have difficulty having compassion for the nearest and dearest to us. We have compassion for those a little further away with whom we agree, and then we lose compassion again when we go further still. It's the middle ground. Tom, yes. When you are able to remove self from self and place yourself in the position of another, then begins the evolution of the planet. Then this planet begins being the paradise that it was planned to be, yes? Express yourself in words of love and words of joy, and that makes the universe in happiness. For when there is happiness, joy and laughter in the universe, it is time of great celebration. This is what planet Earth must do. Humankind must not take itself so seriously. It must begin to experience within itself the joy of its divinity, the joy of its oneness with the universe. It must pull itself out of its bondage. It must stop living in a situation of victims. We have never asked for a victim or sacrifice that humankind in its guilt creates its victimhood. For it knows that it has passed and has crossed that valley that it should not have, and now together with all we are bringing it back across the valley for it to be one with the universe. The next transmission was concerned with other communications and their validity. Andrew, I want to ask about psychic communications. Could you give us an idea as to who in the past, historically recognizably, figures, were what you would call perfect communicators, as you say this being is. Could you tell us of any that we can rely on? Tom, I will consult for permission. There was the one you called Jesus of Nazarene. You knew that. There was the one that you call Socrates. There was the one that gave to you in code Nostradamus. There was the one that was one and the same as that of Jesus, the Buddha. Remember this. There was perfect communication, and it was in translation that it became obscure. In all the translations. Andrew, in all of these cases, I see, right. Tom, then there was Elijah, and there was the one called Joseph. Andrew, which Joseph was that? There are several in the Bible. Tom, it would be the one that was in Egypt. And there was one whose name was Da Vinci. We speak to you only of those that have been recorded historically. There have been many others. Andrew, a more recent figure like Helen Blavatsky, would she qualify? Tom, I must consult. Yes, Blavatsky was true. Andrew, are there any who have lived in the past 100 years who were scientists who recorded knowledge that is true? Tom, that knowledge comes from a civilization. Andrew, I see. You're talking about these directly speaking with you. Tom, yes. John, may I ask you about the Theosophists? I assume that the person who spoke through Blavatsky and Alice Bailey was the same person known to us as the Tibetan Jwal. Tom, that is not true. John, could you tell us who the Tibetan is then? Tom, we're trying to find a way of explaining. If you have three people who came together, a triangle, and if the three merge in mind, you would have oneness. The Tibetan is a triangle. John, does he have a direct relationship to the nine? Tom, it is as if we know not how to explain. It's incomprehensible in your language. It's not a physical thing. The information comes from a triangle. John, is it of a high quality? Tom, yes. It is taken from three, the perfect aspects of the three. Do you understand that? John, yes, I do. Tom, the Tibetan was different to Blavatsky. Andrew, I have recently looked again at the writings of Michael de Nostradamus, and I've been very impressed how his predictions made 400 years ago are parallel to the ones that you have made about what is coming. Who was this Michael de Nostradamus, that he was so prescient way back when, and were you behind his foreknowledge? Tom, when there was prediction, people took it as definite reason to be out of their responsibility. It was an error that we made also, for humans hold destiny in their hands. What was not understood by humankind was that prediction was made to have man change his way. If he did not change, then the prediction would come into being. We cannot reiterate that point enough. We wish that to be impressed upon humankind's mind, for it is the beginning of humankind's understanding, that they hold the key, they are responsible, and they make the change. You ask who he was. He was doing the same as you are doing at this time. We now wish for light to come forth, for the removal of darkness, for the removal of humanity's belief that darkness must take place. For there are two alternatives. The one of darkness have existed too long. It is time for those of light, and that is your choosing. Humankind does not need despair, hopelessness, or futility, but hope, love, and the possibility of goodness. Here is an exploration of principles which can contribute another thread to the tapestry of our understanding. John, could you say that whether in fact there are 12 principles that have come in, and if the final one is balance, is that correct? Tom, I will consult for permission. It is affirmative, but with a reservation. John, yes. Well, could you mention some of the other principles and the time at which they came? That might help me to understand principles that came in at different times. Tom, in the time between the father of Abraham and Moses, and spanning the time of Jacob, was the principle of law. When we speak of law, we speak of the following of the law of the 9. That does not mean that the law that was given had the necessity of being adhered to from that point until what you would call eternity. But it was important for that time. In the true sense, natural law does not change, but law for order in the universe in relationship to a singular planet is adaptable to change. When we speak of law in that time, we speak of a law that those that we have asked, as we had asked Abraham, Jacob and Moses, do what we had asked in faith. It was a form of law. John, yes, I feel that there is something important behind these principles. I feel they're associated with the 12, i.e. the 9 plus 3, the 3, and the 9. Are these periods regular in length, or do they vary? Am I on the right track? Tom, we understand what you are getting at. Again, we answer with an affirmative, but also with reservation. For there have been times that are in closeness to other times of great distance. John, I don't quite understand. Tom, there are those times which have great expansions, and then there are those times which are short periods. John, yes. Has there been another one between the time of Christ and now? Tom, that of Christ was the final before you today. The period at the time of Althea was of wisdom. The principle of justice came at the time of Ur, the time of Horus. In Egypt was of knowledge, and knowledge also became out of balance. Yes? That was chapter 15. Chapter 16 is entitled War and Peace in the 1990s. And I shall read it when I read it.